The world is a tapestry of suffocating green, a dense and humid realm where the air hangs heavy with the scent of wet earth and rotting vegetation. In this epoch, the sun struggles to penetrate the thick canopy of the gallery forests and the towering elephant grass of the savannas. It is a time of biological excess where nature has poured its energy into creating giants. The lowlands are a paradise of calories teeming with fruits, tubers and herds of grazing herbivores. But this abundance is a deceptive lure. For the small, hairless bipeds navigating the forest floor, this lush garden is not a home. It is a meticulously designed slaughterhouse where death waits behind every frond. Visibility on the valley floor is a luxury that the early hominids do not possess, for the architecture of the landscape conspires against them. The grass stands taller than a man's head, creating a labyrinth of golden walls that rustle with the wind and the movement of hidden beasts. To walk on the flat ground is to be perpetually blind, severed from the horizon, unable to see the threat until it is within striking distance. The tribe moves in a tight phalanx, eyes darting nervously, necks craning to peer over the vegetation, but their senses are woefully inadequate. They are land dwellers trapped in a sea of grass, swimming blindly, while leviathans circle in the deep unseen currents of the plain. Domination of this horizontal world belongs exclusively to the megafauna creatures, engineered by evolution to rule through sheer mass and terrifying speed. The saber-toothed cats, with their elongated canines and muscular forelimbs, patrol the game trails with the silence of ghosts. Huge hyenas, larger and more bone-crushing than their modern descendants, sweep across the open spaces in coordinated packs that act as a single grinding machine. The short-faced bear, a towering mountain of fur and muscle, claims entire river bends as its personal territory. Against these titans, the primitive human is a biological absurdity, soft-skinned, slow-footed, and lacking both claws and natural armor. The ground beneath their feet is vibrant with the vibrations of heavy hooves and paw pads, a constant tremor that signals the movement of the giants. Every step the tribe takes on the soft loam leaves a scent trail, a chemical beacon that screams of vulnerability to every nose in the valley. They are not the hunters here. They are the convenient protein, the slow-moving snack that requires little energy to catch. The hierarchy of the plains is absolute, and brutal weight dictates survival, and the hominids are tragically light. They exist in the margins, scavenging quickly from the kills of others, always looking over their shoulders, their existence defined by the constant corrosive drip of adrenaline. Water sources, the lifeblood of the valley, are the most dangerous theaters of all, transforming thirst into a gamble with mortality. The riverbanks are thick with reeds and mud, perfect camouflage for the ambush predators that lie submerged like drifting logs. To drink is to lower one's head, to expose the neck, to surrender situational awareness for precious seconds. The tribe approaches the water in shifts, some drinking frantically, while others stand guard with primitive wooden stakes, screaming and throwing stones at the slightest ripple. Yet even with these precautions, the water claims them. A sudden lunge, a splash of violence, and a member is dragged into the murky depths, leaving only expanding ripples of red. The psychological burden of this existence is etched into the very posture of the species, a permanent crouch of anticipation. There is no leisure in the lowlands, no time for the intricate development of culture or complex thought, when the brain is entirely hijacked by the amygdala. Stress is the constant companion, a chemical fire burning in the blood that prevents true rest or relaxation. The elders bear the scars of narrow escapes their bodies, maps of torn flesh and healed fractures, while the young learn silence before they learn to walk. To make a sound is to invite an investigation. To cry is to ring a dinner bell for the prowling wolves. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, the true terror of the floor commences. The diurnal predators retire, but they are replaced by the night stalkers, creatures with eyes adapted to pierce the gloom. For the hominids, night is not a time of restoration, but a time of paralysis, where the visual world vanishes, leaving only the terrifying soundscape of the hunt. They huddle together in temporary nests made of thorn bushes and matted grass, flimsy barriers that offer no real physical protection against a determined attacker. The darkness amplifies every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, transforming the imagination into a tormentor. The flat ground offers no topographical advantage, no place to retreat where the enemy cannot follow. A tree might offer temporary respite, but the great cats are climbers too, and the bears can shake the trunks until the fruit falls. The tribe is forced to sleep with one eye open, rotating the watch, shivering not just from the dropping temperature but from the primal knowledge of their own exposure. They are terrestrial castaways anchored to a surface that belongs to the monsters. The campfire, small and smoky, is their only weapon, a flickering circle of light that holds back the shadows but also announces their location to the entire valley. Then comes the night that breaks the cycle, a pivotal moment of catastrophe that will redirect the destiny of the lineage. The moon is hidden behind thick monsoon clouds, rendering the valley floor an abyss of absolute blackness. The air is still the usual chorus of insects, silenced by the approach of a predator. The tribe is huddled in a depression near a dried creek bed, the safest spot they could find, surrounded by a perimeter of dry branches. But the wind shifts, carrying the scent of the sleeping primates downwind directly into the nostrils of a hunting pack of Dinophelis, the terrible cat specialized in killing primates. The attack does not begin with a roar, but with the sudden wet sound of a skull being crushed in the dark. The perimeter is breached in seconds, the thorn barrier trampled under heavy paws. Chaos erupts instantly, a cacophony of shrieks, snarls, and the sickening thud of bodies colliding. The darkness is absolute, making organized defense impossible. The hominids strike out blindly with their wooden clubs, hitting empty air or tragically each other. There is no formation, no strategy, only the frantic, scrambling panic of prey, realizing they are trapped in a slaughter pen. The camp dissolves into a riot of blood and dust. The predators move with terrifying efficiency, their eyes reflecting the dying embers of the fire as they isolate and dismantle the tribe. A mother is torn from her infant. A strong male, the group's protector, is swatted aside like a doll, his chest cavity crushed by a single blow. The smell of fresh blood saturates the humid air, triggering a feeding frenzy that draws in other scavengers from the periphery. The flat ground provides no bottlenecks to defend, no high ground to retreat to. It is an open arena, and the humans are the slow, soft targets in a game they were never meant to play. Survivors scatter into the tall grass, crawling on their bellies, suppressing the urge to scream, their hearts hammering against their ribs like trapped birds. They leave behind the dying and the dead, their flight fueled by sheer animal terror. They scramble through the mud, tearing their skin on thorns, moving away from the carnage, away from the smell of death. They do not stop until their lungs burn and their legs fail, collapsing miles away in the grey light of pre-dawn. The group is shattered, reduced to a handful of trembling individuals who have lost everything, their tools, their kin, and their illusion of safety. Morning reveals the grim reality of their existence on the valley floor. The sun rises over a landscape that looks indifferent to their suffering, the golden grass swaying gently as if it holds no secrets. The survivors regroup, their eyes hollow, their bodies shivering in the morning mist. They look back towards the site of the massacre, watching the circling vultures that mark the graves of their families. The message is clear, written in blood and silence: the lowlands are a grave. To stay on the level ground is to accept inevitable extinction. The environment itself has rejected them. In this moment of profound despair, their gaze shifts. They look away from the lush, treacherous green of the valley and lift their eyes towards the horizon. There, rising stark and grey against the blue sky, are the towering walls of the limestone cliffs, the mountains. Before this day, the cliffs were merely background barriers that blocked the path of migration. Now, in the harsh light of survival, they look different. They look difficult, unforgiving, and barren. But most importantly, they look empty. There are no herds grazing on those vertical faces, no dark shapes moving in the shadows of the sheer rock. The realization is slow born, not of genius, but of desperate necessity. The predators that rule the world below are heavy. They are bound to the earth by their massive bulk. They cannot fly, and they cannot cling to the sheer face of a precipice. The cliff is a world apart, a vertical dimension where the rules of the savannah do not apply. It is a hostile place of wind and stone, lacking the easy food of the valley, but it offers the one commodity the tribe has never possessed: distance. Vertical distance. The ability to be above the teeth, to be out of reach. The leader of the remnant group, a scarred male clutching a broken spear, takes the first step, not across the plain, but towards the scree slope at the base of the mountain. It is a decision that defies the logic of comfort. They are leaving the warmth and the water for the cold and the dry. They are trading the soft earth for the hard bruise of granite. But the memory of the night's slaughter propels them forward. The fear of the ground has finally outweighed the fear of the height. The flat world has exiled them, and so they must ascend. They approach the base of the cliffs as the sun reaches its zenith, the rock radiating a dry, dusty heat. The vegetation begins to thin, the tall grass giving way to scrub, brush, and loose gravel. The sounds of the jungle fade, replaced by the whistle of the wind through the canyons. The transition is physical and immediate. The muscles required to walk on the plain are different from those needed here. They must lift their knees high, engage their core, and use their hands to stabilize their bodies against the rising angle of the earth. The ascent begins not as a conquest but as an escape. They are refugees seeking asylum in the sky. The first few hundred feet are grueling, the loose scree sliding under their feet, threatening to send them sliding back down into the jaws of the world they are fleeing. But with every meter gained, the perspective shifts. The monsters of the valley shrink, transforming from terrors into specks. The air grows thinner, cleaner, free from the heavy, rotting humidity of the forest floor. They are entering a new biome, a vertical desert, that will demand a completely new way of being human. As they pull themselves onto the first narrow ledge, breathing hard, looking down at the green ocean of the canopy below, a profound psychological shift occurs. For the first time in their lives, they are looking down at the threat. They are not looking over their shoulders, they are looking from above. The cliff face stretches up towards the clouds, a fortress of stone waiting to be inhabited. The age of the flatland victim is ending. The age of the cliff dweller is about to begin. The monsters remain below, prowling the shadows, but the humans have found the ladder out of hell. The transition from the horizontal plane to the vertical axis is a violation of the primal mammalian instinct to keep all four limbs near the ground. For the tribe, this is not merely a change in direction. It is a migration into a completely alien biome where the laws of physics are aggressively enforced by gravity. The loose scree at the base of the cliffs gives way to solid limestone, a grey skeletal surface that demands a new vocabulary of movement. The muscles of the legs, once used for the rhythmic lope of the savannah, must now act as pistons driving the body weight upward, while the arms previously used for balance or carrying become the primary anchors of existence. The ascent is slow, a grueling puzzle of friction and leverage where a single miscalculation translates into a terminal fall. The hand of the hominid evolved for grasping branches and manipulating tools now finds its ultimate purpose in the architecture of the stone. Fingers callous and bleed as they jam into narrow fissures seeking purchase in the cold rock. The tactile feedback is immediate and unforgiving. They learn the texture of safety and the crumbling sensation of death. Every hold is tested, every ledge inspected for stability before weight is committed. This is a sensory education of the highest order, where the nervous system is rewired to interpret the language of the cliff face. They are no longer walking on the earth. They are wrestling with it, pulling themselves up the spine of the continent one handhold at a time. But this is not a solitary climb of athletic individuals. It is the mass migration of a community, a logistical nightmare of staggering proportions. The tribe moves as a disjointed chain, the strongest males and females leading the way to scout for holds, while the elderly and the young are hoisted and shoved from below. The silence of the hunt is replaced by the grunts of exertion and the terrified whimpers of infants strapped to their mothers' backs with woven vines. These mothers perform a feat of biological heroism, climbing with an altered center of gravity, their fingers bearing the weight of 2 generations. The infant's grip, an ancient reflex from their arboreal past, tightens instinctively, their small hands clutching fur and hair as the world below tilts and spins. Among the climbers, there is a burden even more precious and perilous than the children the fire. They cannot make fire from scratch quickly enough to survive the coming night, so they must carry it with them. An elder clutches a hollowed-out ox horn or a bundle of damp moss encasing the smouldering embers, climbing with only one effective hand. This handicap is terrifying. To drop the fire is to sentence the tribe to freezing darkness. To fall while protecting it is to die in vain. The smoke trails behind them, a thin grey ribbon marking their ascent, the smell of burning wood mixing with the dust of the limestone. They are stealing the gift of the gods and taking it up to the heavens, a Promethean struggle played out on a sheer cliff face. As they rise, the environment assaults them with a new weapon, the wind. On the valley floor, the vegetation acted as a buffer, but here, exposed on the open face, the air currents are unimpeded and ferocious. The wind does not just blow, it scours. It sucks the moisture from their skin and grit into their eyes, forcing them to squint against the glare of the unshaded sun. The temperature fluctuates wildly. The rock that burns their palms at midday becomes a block of ice as soon as the shadows lengthen. There is no shade here, no soft mulch to lie on, only the hard, unyielding reality of the geology. They are exposed specks on a vast, indifferent wall, vulnerable to the elements in a way they never were in the forest. The search for a habitable ledge is a desperate quest for geometry, a horizontal flaw in the vertical perfection. They are not looking for comfort. They are looking for a shelf wide enough to lie down on without rolling into the abyss. The scouts scan the cliff face, reading the shadows that indicate depth, shouting signals that are whipped away by the gusts. They bypass small protrusions that offer no shelter, pushing higher, driven by the memory of the teeth below. Finally, they find it a recessed overhang, a scar in the mountain's side, protected by a lip of stone. It is difficult to reach, requiring a traverse over a terrifying drop. But its inaccessibility is its greatest asset. If it is hard for them to reach, it is impossible for the leopard. Scrambling onto the ledge, the tribe collapses, gasping in the thin, dry air, their bodies trembling from the adrenaline dump. The space is cramped, the floor uneven, and littered with the debris of centuries of erosion. There is no water here, a grim realization that sets in as their thirst begins to rage. They are safe from the predators, but they have severed their connection to the lifeblood of the valley. To drink, they will have to descend a realization that establishes the brutal rhythm of their new life. But for now, they simply lie on the stone, pressing their cheeks against the cool rock, their hearts slowly synchronizing with the stillness of the high altitude. They have arrived, but they are not yet residents. They are intruders in the domain of the eagle. The view from the ledge offers a paradigm shift in the human consciousness. Looking down, the terrifying monsters of the plain are reduced to insignificant dots, their movements predictable and slow. The spatial relationship between hunter and prey has been inverted. For millions of years, the hominid looked up in fear. Now they look down in judgment. This change in perspective is not just physical, it is cognitive. They can see the patterns of the herds, the path of the river, the layout of the world. They are beginning to understand the landscape as a map, a conceptual leap that will eventually lead to strategy and planning. The cliff is not just a fortress, it is an observatory. However, the mountain demands a tribute for this safety. As afternoon fades into evening, the sky turns a bruised purple and the sanctuary of the ledge transforms into a wind tunnel. The protection of the cave mouth is minimal and the temperature plummets with shocking speed. There is no insulation here, no canopy to trap the heat of the day. The tribe huddles together in a tight pile of limbs and fur, a single organism trying to conserve thermal energy. The embers are coaxed into a small, smoky fire fed with dried scrub brush carried up from the slopes. The flames dance wildly in the draft, casting frantic shadows against the cave walls, the first moving images of their new cinema. Then the true test of their resolve arrives, the first high-altitude storm. It begins not with rain, but with a drop in pressure that pops their ears. Dark, bruised clouds slam into the cliff face, having gathered momentum across the entire plain. The wind changes from a gust to a roar, a physical force that threatens to peel them off the ledge like dead skin. There is nowhere to run, no deep cave to retreat into, yet only the shallow depression of the overhang. The rain does not fall down. It is driven sideways, stinging like hail, soaking them to the bone in seconds. The fire hisses and dies, plunging them into a cold, wet darkness. Panic threatens to shatter the group cohesion. The instinct is to scatter to find better cover, but on a ledge, movement is death. The elders shout over the roar of the wind, grabbing the younger ones, forcing them down, flattening them against the rock. They must become part of the mountain. They press their bodies into the crevices, gripping the stone until their knuckles turn white. The thunder is not a distant rumble. It is an explosion right next to their ears, the sound bouncing off the cliff face, amplifying the violence. Lightning illuminates the terror in their eyes, freezing the scene in stroboscopic flashes of blue and grey. The water creates a new hazard, turning the dusty floor of the ledge into a slick of mud and slime. A slip here means sliding over the edge into the black void. Mothers curl around their infants, shielding them with their own bodies, acting as living anchors. The cold is biting a hypothermic grip that saps their strength. They shiver violently, the friction of their bodies against the wet stone, rubbing their skin raw. This is the price of the vertical refuge nature. Here is not a stealthy assassin, but a brute force brawler. They are enduring a beating, a physical assault that tests the limits of their endurance and their will to stay put. Through the long, agonizing hours of the night, they learn the art of static survival. They learn that stillness is warmer than movement. They learn to trust the friction of their skin against the rock. They learn that the person next to them is a source of heat, and that survival is a collective act of huddling. The social bonds of the tribe are forged in this freezing crucible. They are quite literally holding onto each other for dear life. The storm strips away any remaining illusion that they are masters of this environment. They are guests allowed to stay only as long as they can endure the harsh hospitality of the stone. As the storm breaks just before dawn, the wind dies down to a mournful whistle. The sun rises over a washed clean world, its rays striking the cliff face with a brilliant warming light. Steam rises from the damp bodies of the tribe, a collective exhalation of survival. They are battered, bruised, and exhausted, but they are still there. They check their numbers. Everyone is accounted for. The ledge held. The mountain did not shake them off. In the silence of the morning there is a profound sense of accomplishment. They have faced the fury of the sky and stood their ground. They stand up, stretching their stiff limbs, and look out over the valley again. The world below is flooded, the rivers swollen, the mud deep and treacherous. Down there the creatures are struggling in the mire. Up here the rock is already drying. The air is crisp. The advantage of their position becomes undeniable. They have traded the comfort of the soft earth for the hardness of the rock, but in doing so, they have purchased security. They look at their hands raw and scraped, and then at the stone walls that surround them. A pact has been made. The tribe begins to organize the ledge. It is no longer just a place to stop catching their breath. It is becoming a home. They clear the loose stones, creating a flat sleeping area. They stack rocks to create a windbreak for the fire. They are modifying their environment, imposing their will on the geology. This is the first step of architecture, the first act of claiming space. They are not just climbing anymore. They are dwelling. The sky dwellers have been born in the storm, baptized by the freezing rain and hardened by the wind. The ascent is over, but the challenge of living has just begun. They are isolated on an island in the sky, separated from their food and water by a lethal commute. But as they watch the eagles catching the thermals at eye level, they know they cannot go back. The memory of the slaughter on the plains is fading, replaced by the immediate visceral reality of the cliff. They belong to the vertical world now. The rock has accepted them, and they must now learn to harvest the impossible. Time on the cliff face moves differently than on the valley floor, measured not by the thundering passage of herds, but by the slow shifting angles of shadows across the rock. The tribe has settled into the rhythm of the vertical, transforming the bleak limestone shelf into a functioning citadel. The cave mouth, once a terrifying, gaping maw of darkness, has become the hearth and heart of their existence. It is here that the first great advantage of high-altitude living becomes apparent: the hygiene of gravity. In the lowlands, waste accumulated around the campsite, breeding flies and disease, a festering attractor for predators. Here, the refuse of life, bones, excrement, broken tools, is simply cast over the edge. It falls into the void, carried away by the wind, or shattered on the scree hundreds of feet below. The living space remains clean, dry, and surprisingly odorless, a sanitation revolution that silently boosts the immune systems of the entire group. From this high vantage point, the tribe operates as a singular, all-seeing organism, possessing a visual dominance that borders on the supernatural. The watchtower effect fundamentally alters their relationship with the environment. They are no longer reacting to immediate threats, but anticipating distant ones. A lookout perched on a jutting spur of rock can spot the dust cloud of a migrating wildebeest herd 10 miles away, or track the stealthy movement of a saber-toothed cat through the tall grass long before it nears their path. This omniscience reduces the chronic stress that plagued their ancestors. They watch the drama of life and death play out on the stage below with the detached interest of gods safe in their stone gallery, learning the patterns of the world without the risk of participation. However, the fortress exacts a heavy tax in physical labor, for while safety is abundant, resources are non-existent. The cliff offers no water, no firewood, no food. Everything must be imported against the pull of gravity. The daily routine is dominated by the grueling logistics of vertical transport. The water run is the most critical and exhausting task. Young males and females descend the perilous tracks at dawn, with hollowed gourds and animal bladders filling them at the dangerous river's edge, and then begin the agonizing climb back up. Every sip of water consumed in the cave has been paid for with sweat and muscle failure. This constant exertion creates a physiological change in the tribe. Their upper bodies swell with muscle, their grip strength becomes vice-like, and their lung capacity expands to cope with the demands of the ascent. Wood, too, must be hauled up to feed the eternal fire, a sacred duty that prevents the cold of the high altitude from claiming the young. They carry bundles of dry scrub and fallen branches on their backs, navigating the narrow ledges with the balance of mountain goats. The fire is more than heat. It is a signal, a beacon of defiance burning in the night sky. For the predators below, looking up at the strange flickering orange star on the mountain, the message is confusing and intimidating. The fire at the cave mouth creates a thermal barrier, a wall of light and heat that keeps the darkness at bay. Inside the cave, the walls reflect the warmth, creating a microclimate that allows the tribe to shed their tension. For the first time in their evolutionary history, the hominids experienced the luxury of deep, uninterrupted sleep. On the savanna, sleep was a series of anxious naps, broken by every snap of a twig. Here, protected by a sheer drop on 3 sides and a guarded choke point on the 4th, they drift into REM cycles that last for hours. This physiological restoration is profound. Their brains, washed of the metabolic waste of stress, begin to function with new clarity. Dreams become more vivid, memory consolidation improves, and the temper of the group mellows. The cave is an incubator for the mind, a safe harbor where the brain is free to wander into abstract thoughts rather than remaining locked in survival mode. Yet the illusion of invulnerability is dangerous, for the cliff has its own predators, specialized climbers, who see the ledge not as a fortress, but as a pantry. The tribe learns to fortify their position, enhancing the natural defenses of the geology. They gather fist-sized stones from the riverbed and haul them up, piling them in strategic pyramids near the ledge's edge. These are not tools for cracking nuts. They are the first ballistic munitions. They construct low walls of loose rock across the narrowest part of the access ledge, creating a bottleneck that forces any intruder to slow down and expose its belly. The tribe is no longer just inhabiting the terrain. They are engineering a kill zone. The test of their fortress comes on a night when the moon is full, illuminating the cliff face in a spectral silver light. A giant, short-faced bear, a nightmare of muscle and hunger, catches the scent of the humans drifting down from the heights. Unlike the lions who stay on the flat, this beast is a chaotic climber, capable of hauling its massive bulk up the rough limestone. It moves with a terrifying, silent determination, its claws scraping against the rock, finding holds that seem impossible for its size. The lookout hears the rhythmic scraping, a sound that does not belong to the wind. A guttural warning wakes the tribe, and chaos is instantly replaced by a drilled, silent panic. They do not run, for there is nowhere to go. They do not charge, for to fight, a short-faced bear in close quarters, is suicide. Instead, they retreat behind their wall of stones, clutching the heavy river rocks they have stockpiled. The bear crests the final rise, its silhouette blotting out the moon, a towering monster that fills the narrow ledge. It roars a sound that vibrates in the chest cavities of the humans, expecting the prey to scatter or cower. But the prey stands firm, united by the geometry of the cave. The humans are positioned on the higher ground, looking down at the intruder, who is balanced precariously on the lip of the abyss. The attack begins not with spears, but with gravity. At a signal from the Alpha, the tribe unleashes a barrage of heavy stones. They do not need to aim for vital organs. They only need to hit the mass. The rocks rain down with bone-crushing force, aided by the height. One stone strikes the bear's snout, another smashes into its shoulder. The beast, confused and pained by this bombardment from above, rears up to swipe at the attackers, but in doing so it loses its 3-point contact with the rock. The physics of the cliff face are unforgiving. The bear's center of gravity shifts backward past the point of no return. There is a moment of suspension where the massive predator claws frantically at the air, its eyes locking with the humans in a look of sudden primal realization. Then gravity claims its due. The bear falls backward, its roar transforming into a diminishing howl as it plummets into the darkness. The tribe rushes to the edge, watching the dark shape tumble, bouncing off the protruding rocks, until it hits the scree slope below with a wet, heavy thud. Silence returns to the cliff, broken only by the wind. They have killed a monster without suffering a scratch. They have utilized the earth itself as a weapon. This victory cements a psychological shift in the collective consciousness of the tribe. They realize that their weakness, their lack of claws, teeth and weight is negated by their position. High ground is the great equalizer. They look at the piles of stones with a new reverence. These cold, dead rocks are more powerful than the sharpest tooth when delivered from above. The stone fortress is not just a shelter. It is a machine of war that they have learned to operate. The fear that defined their existence on the plains begins to harden into a cold, calculated confidence. They are the masters of the vertical. The days following the attack are filled with a new kind of industry. The defense is doubled. More stones are hauled up larger and heavier than before. They begin to keep a constant watch, specifically for climbers, understanding now that the vertical wall is not a perfect shield but a defensible rampart. They organize shifts, ensuring that the pile of munitions is always stocked. The children mimic the throwing motion in their play, learning the trajectory of the rock, the weight needed to inflict damage. The culture of the tribe is organizing itself around the defense of the home, a concept that barely existed when they were nomads sleeping in the grass. Inside the cave, the social structure deepens. The safety allows the elderly to survive longer, and with age comes memory. The old ones who can no longer make the climb to the river stay behind to tend the fire and watch the young. They become the keepers of knowledge, pointing out the patterns of the stars, the seasonal shifts of the wind, the behavior of the animals below. This transmission of information from the old to the young accelerates in the safety of the cave. The stone fortress becomes a classroom, a library, where the wisdom of the tribe is preserved and passed down, protected from the abrupt, violent interruptions of the predator world. The acoustics of the cave also play a role in their development. The walls reflect sound, amplifying the grunts and calls of the group. In the flickering firelight, they begin to experiment with sound, mimicking the calls of animals, creating rhythmic chants that bond the group together. The cave echoes with the early stirrings of language and music, born from the leisure of safety. They are not just surviving. They are beginning to feel. The harsh utilitarian nature of their existence is softening at the edges, allowing for the first tendrils of culture to take root in the stone. But the isolation is also a prison. As the seasons begin to turn, the wind on the cliff face grows colder, biting into their flesh with renewed hostility. The water sources below begin to shrink as the dry season approaches, forcing them to travel further and climb higher to find sustenance. The fortress is secure, but it is barren. They are kings of a stone castle, but their bellies are often empty. The duality of their existence becomes the central conflict. They are safe from being eaten, but they are in constant danger of starving. The hunger begins to gnaw at them, a slow internal predator that the stone walls cannot keep out. The tribe looks down at the herds moving across the golden savanna, thousands of tons of meat walking in the sun. The contrast is agonizing. Down there is life, energy and blood. Up here is only stone, wind and safety. They realize that they cannot simply hide in the fortress forever. To survive, they must descend. They must take the strength and the strategy they have forged in the heights and bring it back down to the floor of monsters. The fortress has saved them, but it cannot feed them. The next phase of their existence must be an offensive one. They stand at the edge of the ledge, the wind whipping their hair, looking down at the trails they once feared. They are different now. They are stronger, their backs hardened by the haul, their minds sharpened by the watch. They are no longer the frightened refugees who scrambled up the scree. They are the sky dwellers, and they are hungry. The descent will not be a flight. It will be a raid. The stone fortress has done its job. It has preserved them. Now it must serve as the launch pad for their return to the world of flesh. The stone fortress provides sanctuary, but it is a barren kingdom devoid of the calories required to fuel the massive brains and muscles of its inhabitants. Hunger becomes the new dictator of the tribe, a silent, gnawing presence that paces the ledge alongside the sentries. The tribe looks down from their high perch, watching the endless parade of protein on the valley floor with a mixture of longing and dread. They are trapped in a cruel paradox. The only place safe enough to sleep is the one place where they cannot eat, and the only place where they can eat is the place where they are most likely to die. The cliff has solved the problem of predation, but it has exacerbated the problem of starvation. The daily rhythm of the tribe transforms into a grueling oscillation between two distinct worlds, a vertical commute that defies the energy logic of all other primates. At the first grey light of dawn, while the mist still clings to the canopy below, the hunting parties assemble at the lip of the ledge. These are the strongest members of the clan, their bodies reshaped by the demands of the rock, broad shoulders, thick, distinct back muscles, and calloused hands that look like grippers. They check their simple weapons, sharpened wooden staves, hardened in the fire, and heavy river stones strapped to their waists with rawhide. They are not going down to graze. They are descending into the arena of the monsters to steal life. The descent is a controlled fall, a terrifying reversal of the safety they have fought so hard to establish. Moving down is biomechanically more dangerous than climbing up. Gravity pulls at them, eager to turn a slip into a terminal velocity tragedy. They move in silence, communicating with hand signals, testing every foothold before committing their weight. As they lower themselves deeper into the shadow of the valley, the air grows thicker, hotter, and heavier, with the scent of wet earth and animal musk. The psychological weight returns. The god's eye perspective vanishes, replaced by the claustrophobia of the tall grass. They are no longer the observers. They have re-entered the food chain. Their strategy on the ground is dictated entirely by their weakness. They cannot outrun a cheetah or out-wrestle a bear, so they must outthink them. They do not wander aimlessly. They move with surgical precision towards specific targets identified from the cliffs the day before. They have become scavengers of the highest order, using their elevated vantage point to spot the spiraling vultures that mark a fresh kill. The goal is speed and intimidation. They sprint towards the site of a lion's breakfast, a coordinated mob screaming and throwing rocks, hoping to drive the predator away just long enough to hack off a limb or steal the organ meat. This is the bully strategy, a gamble of high stakes, where they trade their numbers and aggression against the confusion of the solitary predator. They descend upon a kill like a swarm of angry hornets, their shouts echoing off the canyon walls to amplify their size. If the predator yields, the butchery is frantic and terrified. They do not eat on the spot. That is a death sentence. They hack at the carcass with flint flakes, severing large chunks of muscle and bone, their hands slick with blood eyes darting constantly to the tree line. Every second spent on the flat ground is a roll of the dice with extinction. However, scavenging is unreliable, and the tribe's growing intelligence demands a more consistent source of energy. They begin to weaponize the terrain itself, turning the geography of the cliffs into a hunting partner. They identify a kill zone, a box canyon, or a narrow ravine with steep walls that leads to a dead end. They do not chase the herds, they manipulate them. Part of the tribe remains on the ridge, hiding behind boulders, while a small group of beaters descends to the valley floor to spook a grazing group of gazelles or wild horses. The goal is to induce panic, to override the animal's instincts with fear. The drive is a masterpiece of interspecies psychology. The beaters do not attack. They simply create chaos, shouting and waving branches to funnel the herd towards the canyon mouth. The animals seeking the path of least resistance flow like water into the trap. Once the herd is committed to the narrow ravine, the dynamic shifts. The humans on the ridge reveal themselves not with spears but with the avalanche. They push massive boulders over the edge, timing the release to crush the lead animals or block the retreat. The ravine transforms into a chaotic tunnel of dust and noise, where the prey is defeated not by claws, but by the vertical impact of stone. From the safety of the rim, the tribe watches the devastation with a cold, calculating satisfaction. They have killed without touching the enemy. They have utilized potential energy, the stored power of the rock and the height to inflict damage that their own muscles could never achieve. The wounded animals in the canyon below are finished off with heavy stones dropped from directly above a mercy that is also a safety measure. Only when the dust settles and the movement ceases does the tribe descend to harvest the windfall. This is the birth of the ambush, the realization that the mind can kill from a distance. But the harvest is only half the battle. The return journey is the true test of their endurance. They are now laden with hundreds of pounds of raw meat, wet hides, and marrow-rich bones. The scent of blood is a siren song that rings out across the savannah, waking every sleeping predator for miles. The return trip to the cliffs is a race against time, a desperate scramble to reach the scree slopes before the heavy hitters arrive. They move in a defensive phalanx, the carriers in the center, the guards on the perimeter, brandishing their spears at the shadowing hyenas. The ascent with the payload is a scene of agony and triumph. To climb a vertical rock face is hard. To do it with a leg of an antelope strapped to your back is a feat of legendary suffering. The blood from the meat drips down their bodies, mixing with sweat, making their skin slippery and attracting flies. Their muscles scream with lactic acid, their fingers cramping as they grip the limestone. They must haul not just their own weight, but the fuel for the tribe's survival. If a carrier slips, they do not just lose a life. The tribe loses the meal. The blood price of the cliff is paid in the sheer caloric expenditure of the climb. Often the predators follow them to the base of the cliff, pacing back and forth in frustration. The lions and bears watch the bipeds ascend, confused by this prey that escapes into the dimension of birds. The humans pause on the lower ledges just out of reach, gasping for air, looking down at the snapping jaws below. It is a taunt, a reinforcement of the boundary they have drawn. The meat is hoisted up on ropes made of braided vines, a technological innovation born of the necessity to separate the load from the climber. The tribe is becoming a machine of logistics, solving the problems of weight and gravity with tools. Upon reaching the main ledge, the mood shifts instantly from terror to jubilation. The fire is stoked high, the flames leaping up to greet the hunters. The meat is not eaten raw if they can help it. It is roasted, the smell of cooking fat filling the cave, a scent that signifies safety and success. This is the social hour, the time when the bonds of the tribe are cemented through the sharing of food. The hunters are treated as heroes, the providers who ventured into hell and returned with life. The elderly and the young eat first, a strategic investment in the group's future and its memory. This diet of high-quality protein and fat consumed in the safety of the cave fuels a rapid expansion of the brain. The expensive tissue hypothesis plays out in real time on the ledge. They have the calories to support a hungry brain, and they have the safety to let that brain dream. The downtime after the meal is not spent in fear, it is spent in communication. They reenact the hunt using gestures and sounds to describe the drive, the trap, the kill. They are analyzing their performance, critiquing the strategy, planning for tomorrow. The cliff is not just a dining hall, it is a war room. However, the physical toll of this lifestyle is etched into their skeletons. The fossils of these cliff dwellers will show thickened cortical bone, massive attachment points for the deltoids and latissimus dorsi, and healed fractures consistent with falls. They are suffering from arthritis at a young age, their joints ground down by the repetitive stress of the climb. But they are also surviving injuries that would be fatal on the plains. A broken leg on the savannah is a death sentence. On the ledge, with a tribe to carry food up to you, a broken leg can heal. The cliff allows for the survival of the lame, provided they have social value. As the season turns to the dry winter, the game becomes scarcer and the commute becomes longer. The tribe must travel further along the ridge lines to find new hunting grounds, extending their territory laterally across the mountain range. They are becoming mountaineers, mapping the high country, finding water trapped in deep rock pools that never see the sun. They are discovering that the mountain has its own secrets, its own hidden resources that are invisible from the valley floor. They are adapting to the thin air, their blood thickening with hemoglobin, giving them stamina that the lowland predators cannot match. The final hunt of the season is a desperate affair. A massive bison separated from the herd wanders near the base of the cliffs. The tribe sees an opportunity for a surplus that could last them weeks. They do not use the trap, the terrain is wrong. Instead, they use the cliff edge itself. They descend and flank the beast, forming a semicircle, screaming and throwing firebrands brought down from the cave. They drive the bison not into a canyon but towards a steep drop-off masked by brush. It is a psychological game of chicken. The bison charges the line of fragile humans, but they hold their ground, waving the fire. Confused and panicked by the flames, the bison turns and bolts towards what looks like open space. It crashes through the brush and realizes too late that the ground has vanished. The tribe watches from the ridge as the massive animal sails into the void, a tragic, heavy arc of biology surrendering to physics. The impact below is earth-shattering. There is no fight, no risk of injury to the hunters. Gravity has performed the execution. The tribe descends to the carcass, cheering, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. They have mastered the art of the remote kill. The butchery that evening is a race against the setting sun. They strip the carcass with efficient brutality, loading the meat into sling packs. They begin the ascent. As the stars come out, their bodies exhausted but their spirits soaring. They are climbing back to their sanctuary, leaving the scavengers below to fight over the scraps of bone and gristle. As they pull themselves over the final lip of stone and collapse by the fire, they are covered in blood and dust, but they are alive. They have successfully raided the underworld and returned to the heavens. The cycle is established. They are the creatures of two worlds, the bridge between the earth and the sky. They have accepted the brutal price of the commute, because the reward is existence itself. The cliff has forged a new kind of human, one who plans, who cooperates, who uses the environment as a tool, and who looks at the world from above. The descent into hell is terrifying, but it is the price they willingly pay for the paradise of the ledge. They are no longer just surviving. They are negotiating with death, and for now they are winning. The limestone cliff is no longer merely a refuge. Over the slow march of millennia, it has become a crucible. Generations of hominids are born on these ledges, grow old within the echo of the caves, and die without ever having slept a single night on the open savanna. To these children of the stone, the vertical world is the norm, and the flat earth below is the alien frontier. This prolonged separation from the immediate crushing pressure of predation creates a biological anomaly, the luxury of safety. For the first time in the history of the lineage, the brain is not solely occupied with the processing of immediate terror. The constant chemical bath of cortisol that defined the lives of their ancestors begins to recede, replaced by a strange and powerful new commodity: boredom. On the valley floor, boredom was a death sentence. A distracted animal was a dead animal. But here, high above the reach of the saber-tooth, idleness becomes the mother of invention. The hours between the morning hunt and the evening sleep are no longer spent shivering in fear, but in the manipulation of matter. A young male sits cross-legged near the fire, not scanning the horizon, but staring intently at a nodule of flint. He has time. He has the leisure to strike it, fail, examine the fracture, and strike again. The cave floor becomes a workshop littered with the razor-sharp debris of experimentation. The tools evolve from crude smashers into elegant symmetrical hand axes, the product of a mind that is free to obsess over symmetry and form. This explosion of technology is fueled by the unique social structure that the cave environment fosters. In the cramped, intimate space of the ledge, privacy is impossible, and observation is constant. A child watches the hands of the master napper, absorbing the rhythm of the strike, the angle of the blow, the sound of the perfect fracture. Education is no longer a fleeting lesson snatched on the run. It is a curriculum of daily immersion. The stone fortress acts as a university where best practices are standardized and transmitted. The error rate drops. The spear points become sharper, lighter, and more lethal, not because the materials have changed, but because the mind working them has been given the space to focus. The safety of the cliff also fundamentally alters the demographics of the tribe, creating a new class of citizen, the elder. In the brutal mathematics of the lowlands, the old and the slow were swiftly culled by the wolves. But here gravity does the protecting. An elder with a bad hip or a cataract can still sit by the fire, tend to the infants, and process the hides. They are no longer a burden. They are a biological hard drive, a repository of data. They remember the patterns of the drought from 20 years ago. They know which roots kill and which heal. They know the migration routes that the young have never seen. The grandmother hypothesis manifests in the glow of the cave fire. These elders hold the infants, freeing the energetic parents to hunt and gather with full efficiency. But they do more than babysit. They talk. In the long hours of the evening when the wind howls outside the sanctuary, the elders use the developing grunts and gestures of the tribe to weave narratives. They tell the story of the great cat, the story of the fire, the story of the fall. This is the birth of oral tradition, the externalization of memory. The tribe is no longer just a collection of individuals living in the present. They are a culture rooted in the past, bound together by a shared history that is kept alive in the safety of the stone. The cave itself acts as a sensory deprivation tank that forces the mind inward. At night, when the valley below is a void of blackness, the cave is illuminated by the flickering hearth. The walls, rough and uneven, dance with shadows that look like moving beasts. The human mind, hungry for patterns, begins to project its imagination onto the rock. A stain of iron oxide looks like a bison. A crack in the limestone resembles a running deer. The impulse to enhance these illusions becomes irresistible. A hand is placed against the cold wall, and a mouthful of red ochre and fat is sprayed over it, leaving a negative imprint. This handprint is a thunderclap in the silence of geological time. It is the first declaration of I am. It is a defiance of mortality, a way to leave a mark that endures after the flesh has rotted. The cave becomes a gallery, a cathedral of the mind where the external world is captured and controlled through art. They draw the animals they fear and the animals they eat, capturing their spirits in charcoal and clay. This art is not decoration, it is a psychological technology, a way to visualize the hunt, to process the trauma of survival, and to assert dominance over the natural world. The incubator of minds is humming with the electricity of symbolic thought. But the world outside does not remain static. The climate begins to convulse, the planet tilting into a long, dark cycle. The warm, lush paradise of the Pliocene fades, replaced by the biting cold of the Pleistocene. The great ice sheets begin to grind their way down from the north, locking the world in a white paralysis. The rainforests of the valley shrink, replaced by dry, cold steppe. The giant herds dwindle or migrate. The green hell becomes the white hell. The temperatures on the open plains drop to levels that would freeze a primate to death in a single night. Here, the geological foresight of the ancestors pays its ultimate dividend. The deep limestone caves chosen originally for defense against predators now serve as thermal batteries against the ice. The temperature inside the deep earth remains constant, immune to the blizzards that scour the surface. The tribe retreats further into the mountain's belly, carrying their fire with them. The narrow entrances, so good for choking off wolf packs, are now blocked with hides and stones to choke off the freezing wind. The cave becomes an ark, a lifeboat floating on a sea of ice, carrying the genetic future of humanity through the bottleneck of the glacial maximum. Inside the ark, the pressure to innovate intensifies. The cold demands clothing not just as a covering, but as a complex engineered system. The bone needles appear fine and delicate, drilled with stone awls. They stitch together the furs of the cave bear and the wolf, creating tailored suits that trap body heat. They are stealing the skins of the monsters to survive the weather. The fire becomes the center of the universe, the only source of light and heat in a world that has gone dark. The tribe huddles closer, the social bonds tightening into an unbreakable knot. To be cast out of the cave is to die. To belong is to live. The diet shifts again. The plant life is gone, buried under snow. They become obligate carnivores, relying entirely on the meat of the megafauna that are also struggling in the cold. The hunting parties that descend from the cliffs are now Arctic commandos, wrapped in fur, moving across the snow on primitive shoes made of woven bark. They hunt the mammoth and the woolly rhino, beasts of immense power. But the humans have the fire-hardened spear and the coordinated mind. They drive the giants into deep snowdrifts, where their weight becomes a trap, then dispatch them with a brutality born of desperation. The cliff life has pre-adapted them for this frozen world. The climbing strengthened their backs, the scarcity taught them rationing, the communal living taught them cooperation. While other hominid branches, those who stayed in the warmth of the vanishing forests, slowly fade into extinction, the cliff dwellers endure. They are the survivors of the filter. The weak have been purged, the strong have been hardened, the clever have been rewarded. The mountain did not just hide them, it forged them into a weapon capable of conquering any environment. As the great winter begins to recede after thousands of years of ice, the glaciers retreat, leaving behind a scarred but reborn world. The sun returns, warming the rock faces that have sheltered the tribe for so long. The survivors who emerge from the caves are not the same animals that scrambled up the scree in panic eons ago. They are taller, their brains are larger, their tools are sophisticated. They possess language, art, fire, and clothing. They have a culture. They look down at the returning green of the valley, not with the fear of prey, but with the calculating gaze of owners. The descent is inevitable. The population has grown, the caves are full, and the new world below is ripe for the taking. But this time they do not go down as refugees. They descend as an invasive species, a force of nature that the lowlands have never seen. They carry the fire in their hands, and the mountain in their hearts. The predators that once hunted them, the saber-tooths, the hyenas, are now facing a unified tool-using pack that knows no fear. The hierarchy of the food chain has been permanently inverted. The children of the cliff have returned to claim the earth. Yet, the memory of the vertical refuge remains etched in the collective psyche of the species. Even as they spread across the plains, crossing continents and oceans, they will always look up with a sense of reverence and belonging. They will build their castles on hilltops. They will construct pyramids of stone to mimic the mountains. They will feel safest when their backs are against a wall and they can see the horizon. The instinct to seek the high ground is a ghost of that ancient terror, a behavioral fossil from the time when the ground was death and the sky was life. We are the descendants of those who ran up the hill. We are here today because when the monsters came, our ancestors chose the difficult path of the stone over the easy path of the grass. The cliff was the nursery where the human soul was incubated, protected by the hard grey ribs of the earth until we were ready to be born. The wind that howls through the canyons today sings the same song it did 1,000,000 years ago. A song of survival of the fragile flesh that conquered the rock and of the enduring power of looking down.